Within the narrative medium of video games, there seems to be this one recurring theme. Especially within the past decade, there seems to be this desire to write about characters that regain their innocence through taking care of a child. Or the ever stoic archetype, one that is troubled by their past and won't allow their child to ever know about it. This happens a lot. I had an original idea for this video where I was going to compare 4 different characters, and I realized that 3 of them are really similar already. Looking at it in actual objective terms, there seems to be this similarity in behavior between Joel, Kratos, and Lee. And at a point it feels like I'm going to be talking about the same characterization all the time in all 3 of these chunks. Now don't get me wrong, they will have aspects of themselves that are very different from one another. But they all also have tragic backstories that they don't want their child knowing about. And the care scale between the 3 of them basically just goes Kratos, Joel, then Lee. I guess what I'm trying to say is, the themes are very similar. But the 4th character that I wanted to talk about didn't have those themes. In actuality, his narrative seems to focus more on the present day. And moreover, this actual focus on his present day is what I believe makes him the greatest father in all of gaming. So join me, this is going to be a bit of a personal video, but also it's going to be a bit of a retrospective on the one and only Asura's Wrath. Let's rock. Before I get into the personal stuff, I want to get into the gameplay and I want to get into the story. Because one of the problems I had when researching about this video is how people called it a glorified QTE simulator, which I kind of disagree with. Let's break it down just a tad and we can talk about the QTEs as we come along. The gameplay of Asura's Wrath can be summed up in 3 different sections. The action sections, where you beat the hell out of your enemies to fill up a bar. The spectacle sections, which are the consequence of activating the bar. These of course are responsible for the QTE sections too. And the rail shooter sections, which are actually surprisingly entertaining. Replaying the game after all these years, I found that the consensus of it being mostly QTEs was entirely wrong. In fact, you spend a good chunk of your gameplay actually going through these shooter sections and going through these action sections. And they are a lot of fun. The combat isn't exactly the deepest on the planet. You're split into heavy, light attacks and dodging and blocking. But the actual crunch of the combat, the actual impact of your hits is what lends to its satisfaction. Combat is intuitive, but it's not exactly simple either. This game comes complete with boss fights. And some of these fights are actually really difficult. I found my first fight with Yasha to be especially hard. And don't even get me started on Deus. Deus was whoa. Timing is essential. You need to time your dodges and you need to time your attacks in order to maximize your damage output. The action sections come with 2 bars, as I mentioned before, but I never really explained what they do. You have, of course, the burst bar, which is responsible for starting the spectacle sections. This gradually fills as you beat down on your enemies. Then you have this small transformation bar, which allows you to do a little more damage as well as spam your heavy attacks for a little while. This is also an interesting little layer, because you have this goal to aspire to so that you can maximize your output when it comes to damage. And the game is like this all the time, even within its shooter sections. You have access to the super bar and you have access to the burst bar, and these can be activated at your whim. Do enough damage in base and you can do things to increase your damage output when you go into super mode. It's actually fantastic and weirdly addictive. And then there's the QTE sections. Being the action-heavy gamer that I am, I thought that this would be my least favorite element of this game. But actually, it ends up being the thing that drives you in this game. It's actually really hard to explain, so I'm going to try my best. Just bear with me. The QTEs are mapped to your attack buttons. In most QTE events within any game that you play, they're usually mapped to random buttons. And they can change every time in order to keep you on your toes. But also for me, this always caused some disconnect. Imagine the jump button being triangle on your controller. With Asura's Wrath, every action and every QTE is mapped to a button that you've used before for said action. When you have to punch extremely hard, you have to hit the triangle button. When you have to dodge, you have to hit the X button. This, in a weird way, connects you to QTEs a bit more, because by transferring over the control scheme that you use in other areas of the game for the actions that you're about to perform, it feels almost as if nothing changes and that your actions are in fact the same as they always were, connecting you fully with the familiar control scheme and rewarding you with its spectacle. There are other things that make this incredibly great. Just look at this.
Priestess Mithra lent her power to the Shinkoku army, and all of Gaia rejoiced at the victory over Vlitra. But this time of celebration did not last, for in the shadows of victory, the wheels of betrayal had already been set in motion, one that would shake the very foundation of Shinkoku.
By Capcom, Asura's Wrath was pitched as this interactive anime, and the spectacle gameplay helps facilitate this in so many ways. But I think the biggest thing about it is that your impact is where your QTE takes place. You don't hit the button before you perform an action, and you sure as hell don't hit it in the nick of time. No, you hit this at the moment of impact. And I think this is what we call the perfect QTE. Quick time events done right, for fuck's sake. Events where you feel like you're the one making the impact over the game just giving you some arbitrary obstacle to get over. Where the action you perform can single-handedly launch an opponent sky high. Look, I don't know, there's just something so satisfying about this method of play. Couple this, of course, with the insane amount of spectacle in these sections. The level of action just being totally unlike anything I've ever seen in my life. And I swear to God, this is exactly how QTEs are meant to be done. When you finally put all these three elements together, you get variety done correctly. Which is something even Capcom have failed at in the past, as you've probably already guessed. It's underwater level. This is not how you do it. Overall, the gameplay is designed to take advantage of the spectacle that it's putting out in front of you, to place you into the moment-to-moment sections where you can take control of what's going on, to feel part of the impact that the character has on everything around them. The narrative helps facilitate this, its universe-spanning concepts being absolutely off the charts. Let's just run through the basics at first. Asura's Wrath tells the tale of a man who has been betrayed by those he cared for most. Starting out as one of the highest generals in all of his army, he and the rest of the gods are charged with fighting the Goma, the demons of this world. The thing is though, they seem locked in this everlasting conflict against them. Asura's fellow gods, realizing that they need a better solution, come up with the idea of using Mithra, Asura's daughter and the current conduit of Mantra, the energy source of the gods, as a never-ending energy supply in order to power their fight against the Goma. To achieve this, they murder Asura's wife, they kidnap Mithra, and they frame Asura for the murder of the High Chancellor. They do this of course knowing that Asura wouldn't go along with their plan to use Mithra as an energy source, and therefore resolve to get rid of him. They expel him from the heavens, but not before he proclaims, You'd be forgiven of course for drawing narrative comparison points between this and God of War, both of which feature an enraged protagonist trying to kill the gods, but where they differ is in their purpose. This we'll touch on later. Narratively, there's a lot more going on than there appears to be on a surface level. I don't want to reveal every conceivable plot point because there is a lot that you want to experience with this game overall, but the themes and ideas that it touches on are kind of crazy, and deeper than you'd perhaps expect from this kind of game where all you can really see is a man seeking vengeance. It's the how, the why, the who, and the things that go on around him that factor into the story depth. I think one of the bigger themes I saw here though was something I wanted to touch on in a separate video, but I feel comfortable talking about here right now, just kind of briefly. It's the concept of the heroes of old versus the heroes of new. And this is an odd one to try and explain, but hear me out. In this world, the general perception seems to be that the heroes are the gods that are siphoning power from a child. Where they see heroism in them, they don't at first see heroism in our titular protagonist, who, through his own will and through his own power, has chosen to fight back against these injustices. His methodology seeming archaic compared to the gods of new, those who of course seek shortcuts into answering their prayers for power. The ever-working hard hero archetype, the type that goes up against the odds despite everything being stacked against them, the type that has trained hard to get to the power level that they're at. This is a classic theme across anime and across video games. As the literal thousands of years seem to pass in this game, the only thing that seems to change is people's idea of a hero. There's still death, there's still destruction, there's still war, there's still pleading for their own lives. But at no point do the humans of this world ever question the actions of the gods. Because as time has gone on, these new approaches to combat and to fighting the evils of this world have become the new norm. And essentially, this is what Asura is going up against. Gods that require worship in order to get their powers back to their standard. Gods willing to cross any line necessary in order to achieve what they consider justice. Against this, Asura only really has one answer. I love that Asura's answer to everything here is that he simply has to fight harder. Characteristically, it demonstrates a sense of determination, his unwillingness to back down despite his literal limbs being destroyed. fighting with literally anything he has at his disposal. As far as characters go, this just highlights that he's deeper than he appears on a surface level. But what serves to make him a deeper character overall is the driving force for what he does, and that is ultimately his daughter Mithra. This is where the personal stuff starts to kick in, and I'm sorry if it gets a little too deep or a little too uncomfortable, but here we go. You know, for this video, I was gonna put in a very simple way, in the most basic way possible, why Asura is probably the best of these parenthood archetypes. In all honesty, I could draw upon many different reasons. In fact, there's like 60 different just in the first few chapters alone. And whilst he isn't the most talkative character on the planet, the things he says has a lot of impact on everything that happens around him. Simple scenes like the humans coming to worship him for saving their lives and him responding with,
"Stop praying. This is pathetic."
But looking at Asura more closely, I think the reason that I'm most endeared to him is the lengths he's willing to go in order to save his daughter. See, when I look at the other characters that I was going to use for this original video, I see that their circumstances are entirely different. From Asura's, I mean. You see, these are characters that have their children in their sight at most times, and so their ability to look after the child in question isn't exactly compromised by outside forces as much as it is with Asura's case. That's not to say that their circumstances aren't more dangerous. I mean, there's demons, there's zombies, there's clickers? Yeah, I was trying to say a different word for zombies for The Last of Us, but I think they're called the Infected if I'm not wrong. Shit, I messed up. But in Asura's case, Mithra was left in the care of those he trusted. I mean, Yasha is his friggin' brother-in-law for fuck's sake. And yet the decision was made to take away the thing most important to him in this world. And it's not Asura's fault that any of this happened. I mean, she was placed in the care of her mother, and the gods were meant to take care of her like they were her own. This split decision, this craving for power that they all suddenly started to have an effect on how they operated. And yet Asura is uncorrupted by all of it. In fact, he's empowered by his circumstances, driven by his rage and anger in order to achieve vengeance for what was done to him and to his family. And what sucks is every time that Mithra is finally within his grasp, every time he thinks he's finally saved her, things go south and things just start to get worse. Asura is by no means the most endearing character on the planet. In fact, he's the kind of character you probably wouldn't root for. He's constantly enraged, cynical, and at times even misanthropic in the way that he comes across. And yet we're endeared to him because of what he's willing to do and how far he's willing to go. To highlight to you what Asura is capable of, let me just run through what happens when someone who merely looks like his daughter is put in harm's way.
What was that?
This is nuts. You see, in this world, every god has a mantra that they're empowered by. Yasha, for example, is empowered by melancholy, and so sadness fills his energy. Asura's is rage, anger. And so at what point do these gods think it's a good idea in order to piss off somebody who's empowered by their rage? It's a mistake that they continuously make, and as a result, Asura achieves his vengeance. He goes on to defeat all of the gods that were considered his superior by a jury of his peers, his motivation being the force that causes this all. The world is constantly changing around him as the literal millennia go by, and yet Asura's motivation remains singular and on course. You know I said I wasn't going to talk about the plot too much, but I feel like the ending is very important to his entire arc that I'm trying to explain here. And so if you want to avoid this, you are more than welcome to skip ahead to the ending where I summarize everything, but I want to talk about it, so here we are. Asura defeats all the gods and he finally has his daughter within his grasp, but the spider that's been manipulating him this whole time finally reveals his true self, the Chakravartin, the origin of all mantra. A little bit of Hindu mythology here. The Chakravarti, which is what it's called in Hinduism, is actually considered the ideal leader of everything. But in the game they altered the definition just a little bit in order to fit the purpose of the narrative. And this is okay, I mean the Chakravartin is still the leader of all mantra, perhaps not the ideal one in this case though. You see, throughout the entire game this golden spider is driving Asura forward a bit more, reminding him of why he's doing what he's doing. But the big twist here is that he wanted Asura's daughter for himself this whole time so that he could have a body, a conduit in order to concentrate all of his power. And with that in hand, he starts to expel everything from the heavens, choosing to alter the world the way he sees fit now. And in this case, you would think that the standard protagonist would say, "Oh my god, you're about to destroy the universe, I must stop you." But this isn't why Asura is driven by anything. Asura makes clear throughout the entire game that he cares not what happens to the things around him, he cares only for destroying those who would dare harm his family. And amazingly, this leads him to new heights, new power, new capabilities that just Yasha decides that he needs to assist him on the matter and so provides him with the mantra reactor, which is like this generator that regulates the energy that's going in and out of a being. This is placed into Asura to ensure that his powers don't destroy him like they always do. Asura loses almost everything throughout this entire ordeal. Hell, even Yasha falls because he's trying to test his capabilities before he goes up against the Chakravartin. Asura has damn near lost all of his family, and yet the one thing he has left in this world, he's willing to fight for till the end. With that in mind, he goes into orbit and finally, we get started with the final battle. And this is universe spanning. I mean, how is the Chakravartin not the strongest thing to ever come out of a video game? The fight goes on for what seems to be hours, and when it finally comes to a head, Asura resolves to destroy the Chakravartin to make sure nothing can ever harm his daughter again. But in spite of everything that's about to happen to him, in spite of everything that could happen in the long run, despite the fact that he's about to be destroyed by the fact that the god that gives him power, gives him existence, is about to be destroyed by his own creation no less, Asura charges forward. And this is just so, his daughter will never be enslaved again. In his charge, he says, how can someone look at Asura and not think that this is the greatest father in gaming? Our perception seems to be that the luggage that they carry through the past is what makes them the most endearing characters in the world. And this ends up being the singular focus of every parental archetype that we come across. We look at Joel and his rough past with his daughter having died, and the fact that he's had to do questionable things in order to survive is what drives him in order to become a better character for Ellie. Lee Everett has a bit of a murderous past, having killed the person that his wife was cheating on him with. And this becomes the driving force in him becoming better, becoming a better person through the exposure of Clementine. And Kratos, I mean, I don't need to talk about him, but he genocided an entire pantheon. And his goal seems to be that he doesn't want Atreus to meet the same fate. These are characters that start to open up throughout the course of their game, that start to understand that there's more to life than the past that they endured. And that's endearing and all, but Asura is already that character. He's already grown and learnt that the most important thing in his life is his family, that the reason he exists is in order to protect them, so that they never know the horrors of the world. He's already gone through his arc, and so this arc is about exploring what he does afterwards. We see brief glimpses through these comic book slides that Asura had a great bond with both his wife and his daughter. We see through cutscenes, through recollections of the past, that he was already close to his daughter, but he wasn't sure how to bond with her when she was born, but that he knew one thing without question, that he would protect her to the ends of the fucking universe. This is why Asura is the greatest father in all of gaming, because of his willingness and desire to protect all of his family despite the fact that he goes through so much. His resolve, it never falters throughout this entire experience. And as he slowly starts to remember his purpose, his power power becomes absolute, because as a father he has something to protect. And in the end, it doesn't matter if he's not the deepest character in all of gaming or if he isn't the most endearing protagonist you've ever seen. He most certainly has the heart, more so than almost any other video game character I have ever seen.
That's why
I couldn't bear to see you suffer.
Stupid.
No more crying. Smile. My wrath is finally